There is a piece of wood at the center of the greatest rescue in the Bible, and by itself it is worth nothing at all. A shepherd's staff, a crooked length of acacia, worn smooth where one hand had closed on it for 40 years. The man who carried it was 80 years old, and he had not been anybody for a very long time. He kept another man's flocks in another man's country, and the only thing in the world that was truly his was that stick. And with it, he walked into the throne room of the most powerful empire on earth, and told its god-king to set a nation of slaves free. When the king refused, the wood came down on the river, and the water of Egypt turned to blood. When he refused again, fire fell out of the sky. The sun went out for 3 days, and in one night every firstborn son in the kingdom died in his bed. Then the same piece of wood was stretched out over an open sea, and the sea stood up. So, what was really in that stick? How could 10 disasters, falling one after another on a single country, be aimed so precisely that each one struck down a different god of Egypt by name? And when the water rose into 2 standing walls, and a whole nation walked out on dry ground between them, what opened it? The staff, or the old man holding it, or the thing that had spoken to him out of a burning bush, and would give no name, but I am. This is the story of Moses, the 10 plagues, and the parting of the sea. Begin 400 years before that staff was ever cut. A family of shepherds had come down out of Canaan to escape a famine, and been welcomed as honored guests because one of their own, Joseph, had risen out of a prison cell to save Egypt from starving. Then Joseph died, and the centuries closed over it, and there arose a new king who did not know Joseph. What he knew was that there were too many of them. So the guests became property, without a battle and without a treaty. Taskmasters were set over them to break them with hard labor, and the Hebrews built the store cities of Pithom and Ramses out of the mud of the Nile. Men waist-deep in river clay, treading straw into mud, carrying wet brick up-ramps in the white heat while somebody else's monuments rose out of their backs. So Pharaoh tried to end it quietly. He called in 2 Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, and gave them a private order. When you deliver a Hebrew woman, if it is a son, kill him. It failed. Those 2 women feared God more than they feared the king. And the boys lived. So the king stopped whispering. He gave the order in the open. Every son born to the Hebrews, you shall cast into the river. The Nile was the life of Egypt, worshipped as a god, and Pharaoh turned it into a grave for children. Hold on to that. God does not forget what was thrown into that river. In a house of the tribe of Levi, a woman bore a son, and when she saw he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. You cannot hide a growing baby in a village full of informers. So she took an ark of bulrushes, sealed it with pitch until it would float, laid the child inside, and set it among the reeds at the river's edge. His sister stood a little way off to watch. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe, saw the small floating thing in the reeds, and had it fetched. She opened it, and the baby wept, and she had compassion on him. "This is one of the Hebrews' children," she said. Then the sister stepped out of the reeds. "Shall I call a nurse of the Hebrew women for you?" So the child was handed back to his own mother, paid palace wages to nurse her own son. She called his name Moses because she said, "I drew him out of the water. The river ordered to kill him, carried him into the palace of the man who gave the order." He grew up a prince of Egypt, learned in all its wisdom, in a court that owned his relatives. But he knew what he was. His own mother had told him, in the years she nursed him. And when he was 40, it came into his heart to go out and look at his brethren, and he saw their burdens with his own eyes. He saw an Egyptian striking a Hebrew, one of his own people. Moses looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. It was not a hero's act. It was a man who wanted justice, could not wait for God to give it, and checked first that nobody was watching. The next day, 2 Hebrews were fighting, and the guilty one turned on him. "Who made you a prince and a judge over us?" Pharaoh sought his life, and the man raised to inherit a throne ran into the desert with nothing. He fled east into Midian and sat down by a well. 7 daughters of the priest of Midian came to water their flock. Shepherds drove them off, and Moses watered the animals himself. Their father took him in and gave him his daughter Zipporah, and she bore a son. And he named the boy Gershom, and said, "I have been a stranger in a strange land, no longer Egyptian, not yet Israelite, a stranger everywhere." And then 40 more years went by, and nothing happened. The prince of Egypt kept another man's sheep, learning where the water was, cutting himself a staff from a desert tree, and getting old. God spent 40 years making him somebody, and 40 years making him nobody, and only then did he use him. Meanwhile, the old king died, and another took his place, and nothing changed. The children of Israel groaned under the labor and cried out, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel and had respect unto them. 4 verbs, and every one of them a hinge. Moses led the flock to the far side of the wilderness, to Horeb, the mountain of God, and saw a bush on fire. That is nothing in a desert. But this bush burned and was not consumed. And Moses said, "I will turn aside now and see this great sight." And God called to him out of the middle of the fire, "Moses, Moses." "Here I am," he answered. "Take your sandals off your feet," God said, "for the place where you stand is holy ground. I am the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, because he was afraid to look at God. Then came the words the slaves had waited 400 years for. "I have surely seen the affliction of my people, and heard their cry, for I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them." Then in the same breath, "Come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh." And Moses began immediately to argue, "Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh?" And God did not answer the question. He said only, "Certainly I will be with you." Then Moses asked, "What would change everything? When they ask me your name, what shall I say?" And God said, "I am that I am. Tell them I am has sent me to you." Every other god in that world was a god of something, of the river, of the sun, of the harvest, a piece of the world with a face painted on it. Not I am the God of the mountain. I am, the one who was there before Egypt and would be there after it. "But they will not believe me," Moses said. So God asked him a question instead, and the whole story turns on it. "What is that in your hand?" "A rod," he said, the most ordinary object he owned. "Cast it on the ground." He cast it down, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from it, because the serpent was the emblem on the crown of Pharaoh himself. "Take it by the tail," God said, and he caught it. And it was a staff again in his fist. Then his hand went leprous inside his own robe and came out clean again. 3 signs were given him, and the first was the stick he was already holding. Even then he begged off, "I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue." And God said, Who has made man's mouth?" And still Moses said, "Send somebody else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against him, and God gave him Aaron his brother as his mouth, and said, "Take this rod in your hand, with which you shall do signs." From that verse on, the Bible stops calling it the rod of Moses and starts calling it the rod of God. Nothing about the wood had changed. Everything about who was holding it had. Aaron met him at the mountain, and together they gathered the elders and did the signs, and the people believed. Then the two brothers walked into the palace, and Moses said the sentence that would be repeated 10 times in that room. "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go." And Pharaoh gave the answer that made all of it necessary. "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go." In Egypt, the king was not a man who served the gods. He was a god, the living son of Ra. And 2 Hebrews had just told him that a god of slaves outranked him. That question will be answered 10 times, and the last answer comes at midnight. His first move was to break the messengers by punishing the people. "You shall no longer give them straw," he ordered. "Let them gather it themselves and lay the same quota of bricks on them." The count fell short, and their own foremen were beaten for it. And they turned on Moses. "You have put a sword in their hand to slay us," they said. And Moses said the same thing to God. "Why have you dealt ill with this people? Deliverance got worse before it got better. It usually does." God's answer was a name, repeated like a drumbeat. "I am the Lord. I will bring you out with a stretched out arm and with great judgments, and you shall know that I am the Lord." So they went back in, and Aaron cast the staff down before Pharaoh, and it became a serpent. The magicians threw down their rods, and theirs became serpents too. And then Aaron's rod swallowed their rods, whole in front of the court. Pharaoh watched a shepherd's stick eat the symbols of his priesthood, and hardened his heart. Now understand what is about to happen, because it is not 10 random disasters. "Against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment," God said. Egypt was a stacked pantheon, and the plagues walk up that stack, one god at a time, from the water at the bottom to the sun at the top, and finally to the throne. Each blow is a courtroom. It began at the water. In the morning, at the riverbank, Aaron lifted the staff and struck the Nile, and the river turned to blood. The fish died. The river stank. All the water of Egypt, even in the vessels of wood and stone in their houses, was blood. And the Egyptians dug along the bank for water and could not find it. Hapi was the spirit of the flood that fed a nation, and the river was called the bloodstream of Osiris. 7 days Egypt lived beside a dead god. Then the frogs. They came up out of the ruined river into the houses, onto the beds, into the ovens and the kneading troughs, onto the king himself. Heqet was the frog-headed goddess of birth, and her sacred animal became a plague. The king cracked. "Entreat the Lord to take them away," he said, "and I will let the people go." The frogs died, and they gathered them in heaps, and the land stank. And when Pharaoh saw there was relief, he hardened his heart. Relief is not repentance. Then Aaron struck the dust, and the dust became gnats on man and beast, and after that came swarms of flies. The Egyptian priesthood was obsessed with purity, and now no priest in the kingdom could stand at an altar without vermin crawling on him. The magicians tried to reproduce it, failed, and told their king, "This is the finger of God." And God put no swarm at all in Goshen, where his people lived. From that day, the disasters had a border, and all Egypt could see where it ran. Next, he struck what Egypt was rich in. A severe pestilence fell on the livestock in the field, and the cattle of Egypt died, and not one animal of Israel's died. Apis the bull and Hathor the cow, dead in the pasture in a single day, and with them the wealth and the war power of the kingdom. Then Moses threw furnace ashes into the air, and boils broke out on man and beast, and the magicians could not even stand in front of Moses, because the boils were on them too. Then the sky came down. Moses stretched the staff toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and fire ran along the ground. And it was the worst storm in the history of that nation, and it killed every man and animal left out in the open. Nut held up the sky, and Set ruled the storm, and neither could keep the ceiling from falling. But a warning came first. "Gather your cattle under shelter," God said, "and everything you love out in the field." And some of the servants of Pharaoh feared the word of the Lord and brought their people inside. Egyptians believed, and they lost nothing that night. The locusts finished what the hail had left. An east wind blew all day and all night, and in the morning the land was darkened, and they ate every green thing, until nothing green was left in all Egypt. And before they came, Pharaoh's own officials broke ranks and said to his face, "How long shall this man be a snare to us? Do you not yet know that Egypt is destroyed?" Everyone could see it, but the one man who called himself a god. Before the darkness falls, one thing. If this is the kind of story you were never told in church, subscribe. There is a new biblical film on this channel every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now, back to Egypt, with the sun about to go out over it, and one last blow coming that nobody in that country survived. Then God reached past all of it and put out the sun. Moses stretched his hand toward heaven, and there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days, a darkness the record says could be felt. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. Ra was the sun, the highest god of the empire, and Pharaoh was called the son of Ra. For 3 days the father was extinguished, and the son sat in the dark in his palace, and could do nothing at all. And when the light came back, he threatened, "Get away from me. See my face no more. For on the day you see my face, you shall die." And Moses said, "You have spoken well. I will see your face again no more." 9 times the record says Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and the first several times he hardened it himself, until God confirmed him in the direction he had already picked. That is the most frightening judgment in Scripture. Not being struck down, but being handed over to what you insisted on. Then came the 10th. About midnight, God said, "I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn shall die, and there shall be a great cry throughout all the land. But against the children of Israel, not a dog shall move his tongue." The firstborn son of Pharaoh was the next living god of Egypt. The last blow was aimed at the throne itself. And here, the story stops dead and turns into an instruction. God did not tell Israel to arm themselves, or to hide, or to run. He told them to have dinner. Every household was to take a lamb without blemish and keep it 4 days, living with the animal that would die in its place, and kill it at twilight. Then take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood, and strike the 2 side posts and the upper doorpost, so that every door in Goshen stood marked in blood on 3 sides. And eat it roasted with bitter herbs, in haste, with your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. A whole nation ate its first free supper standing up, dressed to travel, holding a shepherd's staff. And the promise was this: "When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you." Judgment did not go through Egypt, sorting the moral from the immoral. It went through looking at doors. Any house with the blood on it was passed over, and any house without it was not. What stood between that family and death was not their record. It was a mark in blood that God Himself had told them to put there. It came to pass at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh on his throne to the firstborn of the captive in the dungeon. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, and there was a great cry, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. Imagine that sound rolling from the palace out to the last mud village on the river, all the way down the Nile before dawn. And in the dark, the king sent for the 2 men he had sworn to kill on sight. "Rise up, get out from among my people," he said, "and go serve the Lord. Take your flocks and your herds, and be gone." And then, from the mouth of the man who had said, "I know not the Lord," 4 broken words. "And bless me also." The Egyptians pressed them to hurry, and gave them silver and gold, and Israel walked out paid for 4 centuries of unpaid work. They went out of Ramesses about 600,000 men on foot, besides the children, and a mixed multitude went up with them, and flocks and herds. The dough on their shoulders had no time to rise, and they baked it flat in the desert, and their descendants have eaten that flat bread every spring for 3,000 years. 430 years of slavery ended between sunset and sunrise. God did not lead them by the short road along the coast, where the garrisons were, and war would have turned them straight back. He led them the long way, by the wilderness of the sea. And He went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. For the first time in 400 years, the God who had seemed absent stood visible on the horizon every hour of the day. Then God gave an order that made no military sense at all. "Turn back," He said, "and camp by the sea, in front of Pi-hahiroth." He put a whole nation in a dead end on purpose, with the water in front and the mountains on either side. Pharaoh will say of them, "The wilderness has shut them in," and I will harden his heart so that he shall follow after them, and I will be honored over Pharaoh and all his host. The trap was not a mistake. It was the last courtroom. And in Egypt, with the graves still fresh, the king's grief turned back into pride. Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? He made ready his chariot, 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, and the horsemen and the army, and he pursued after the children of Israel. The most advanced war machine in the ancient world, mobilized against a column of shepherds and children, camped against the water. And Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were very afraid. A long stain of dust on the horizon, and the glitter under it as the sun catches the bronze and the wheels. And the people who had walked out singing turned on Moses. "Were there no graves in Egypt, that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness?" 3 days out of slavery, and they were already homesick for it. And Moses said to the people, "Fear not. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you shall see them again no more forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace." That is the whole theology of the Exodus in one line, spoken by a man with a stick, standing between 600 chariots and the sea. And the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell them to go forward. But lift up your rod, and stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it." Then the pillar of cloud moved and stood behind them, and came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that neither came near the other all night. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. Not a shallow crossing at low tide, a wind roaring in the dark for hours over a nation huddled on the shore, and by morning the water standing away from itself, and the seabed hard enough to walk an ox cart across, and the waters were a wall unto them, on their right hand and on their left. So they went in, a corridor of wet sand and stone running between two standing cliffs of black water, the pillar of fire burning behind them, dark shapes moving inside the walls where the sea still had fish in it, and a whole nation walking its families and its animals into the middle of a sea that had every reason to fall on them. That is what faith looked like that night. Not a feeling, a first step onto ground that had been under the ocean an hour earlier. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, into the middle of the sea. And in the morning watch the Lord looked out at them through the pillar of fire and cloud, and took off their chariot wheels so that they drove them heavily. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them." Too late. And the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea." And he stretched it out, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared, and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh. There remained not so much as one of them. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore in the first light. But that was not the end of it, because the sea was never really the point. A nation of freed slaves, with the wreckage of an empire washing up at their feet, still did not know what all of it had been for. And God had said it plainly at every step, "That you may know that I am the Lord." Egypt was not the enemy the Exodus was fighting. Forgetting was. And within 6 weeks, these same people, who had watched water stand up like a wall, would be complaining about the food. But on that morning they sang, "I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea." And Miriam the prophetess, the same sister who had stood in the reeds watching a basket 80 years before, went out with a timbrel in her hand, and all the women after her, with dancing. She had watched the Nile carry him away. Now she watched the sea bring a nation through. And in that song is the line that answers the question this story began with. "Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods?" Pharaoh had asked, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice?" He got his answer 10 times over. In the river he worshipped, in the frogs and the dust and the flies, in his sacred cattle, in the skin of his priests, in his sky, in his harvest, in the son that was supposed to be his father, and finally in the bed of his own son. And look at what God used to do it. Not an army, not a prince, a man of 80 who had failed at rescuing anybody once, who stuttered, who begged God 4 separate times to send somebody else. The point is not that Moses was extraordinary. The point is who was standing next to him. And that brings us back to the piece of wood. What was actually in that staff? Nothing. It was a shepherd's stick cut from a desert tree, and after the sea closed, it went right on being a shepherd's stick. The wood struck a river, and struck a rock, and was stretched over a sea, and none of the power was ever in the grain of it. God's first question at the burning bush was not, "What do you need?" It was, "What is that in your hand?" Which is why this story refuses to stay 3,000 years away. Almost everybody is waiting to be given something bigger before they will move. Moses had all of Egypt's training, and it produced one dead man in the sand. What God finally used was an old man with a stick, and a promise that I will be with you." The staff never became powerful. It only ever became held. And when the sun came up on the far shore, with a nation alive behind him and an empire face down in the surf, the piece of wood in his hand was still just a piece of wood. And that God, the one who drowned an army in the sea in a single morning, had done something like it once before, on a scale that makes Egypt look small. Long before there was a Pharaoh, before there was a nation to rescue, he looked at a whole world that had gone entirely rotten, and he drowned all of it and saved one family in a wooden box. Noah and the Ark and the end of the world has its own story. It is the next film on this channel, and it is waiting for you now. If you want to know what the world was really like in the days before the flood, how one man built a ship on dry land for 120 years while everyone he knew stood and laughed at him, and what it was like inside that ark on the night the sky broke open and the deep came up, subscribe, and I will see you there.